turning points that changed the modern world. Italy and Germany, the two unifications that redrew Europe. What if two countries you know today were not always countries? What if Italy was once a broken peninsula of kingdoms, duchies, foreign armies, and papal lands? What if Germany was once a loose world of princes, cities, customs borders, and rival crowns? And what if, in barely more than a decade, both of them were pulled together by war, diplomacy, rebellion, ambition, and one dangerous new idea? The idea that people who shared a language, a culture, a memory, or a dream should live under one nation. This is not just the story of Italy becoming Italy. This is not just the story of Germany becoming Germany. This is the story of how Europe's old order began to crack. Because in the middle of the 19th century, two questions started haunting the continent. Could a divided people become one nation? And if they could, would that nation be born through popular revolution or through blood, iron, and power? In Italy, the dream looked romantic. It had poets, secret societies, exiles, volunteers, red shirts, and a revolutionary hero sailing towards Sicily with about 1,000 men. In Germany, the dream looked colder. It had railways, military planning, diplomatic traps, short wars, and a Prussian statesman who understood that nationalism could be used like a weapon. One story gave Europe a new Italy. The other gave Europe a new Germany. Together, they changed the balance of power forever. Before Italy became a country, it was almost a geographical expression. There was the Kingdom of Sardinia and Piedmont in the northwest. There was Austrian influence in the north. There were central Italian states ruled by dukes. There were the papal states ruled by the Pope. There was the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies in the south. People could speak Italian dialects, read Italian literature, and dream of Italy. But politically, Italy did not exist as one state. It was a dream waiting for a body, and the question was simple. Who could turn the dream into a country? One answer was Giuseppe Mazzini. Mazzini was the prophet of the idea. He believed Italy should be united, independent, and republican. To him, Italy was not just land, it was a mission. But prophets can awaken people without necessarily building governments. Another answer was Count Camillo di Cavour. Cavour was not a romantic revolutionary. He was the Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia. He believed in railways, banks, armies, alliances, and careful diplomacy. He did not want an uncontrolled revolution. He wanted a stronger Piedmont to lead the Italian cause. And then there was Giuseppe Garibaldi. Garibaldi was the sword. He had the image of a freedom fighter, the charisma of a legend, and the courage to turn impossible plans into real events. Italy's unification would need all three types of power: the dreamer, the strategist, the warrior. But it would also need something more dangerous: a war with Austria. Austria was the great obstacle in northern Italy. As long as Austria controlled or influenced parts of the peninsula, Italian unity could not be complete. Cavour knew Piedmont alone could not defeat Austria, so he looked outside Italy. He needed France. In 1859, Piedmont and France fought Austria. This was one of the key openings of Italian unification. The war helped Piedmont gain Lombardy, and the movement for unity spread through central Italy. But this was not a clean, simple national rising. It was a messy process of alliances, deals, plebiscites, fear, and opportunity. Italy was being born not only from emotion, but from calculation. And then came the most cinematic moment of the entire story. In 1860, Garibaldi gathered a volunteer force that became known as the Thousand. They were not the army of a great empire. They were not supposed to conquer a kingdom. They were volunteers, many wearing red shirts, sailing towards Sicily. Their target was the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, the powerful Bourbon kingdom in southern Italy. On paper, the plan looked reckless. A small volunteer force would land in the south, ignite rebellion, defeat a kingdom, and bring southern Italy into the national movement. It sounded like a legend before it happened. But that is exactly why it mattered, because nations are not built only by treaties. They are also built by stories people believe in. Garibaldi landed in Sicily in May 1860. Against expectations, his campaign gathered momentum. Local unrest, Bourbon weakness, Garibaldi's reputation, and the power of the national idea all worked together. Soon, Sicily fell. Then Garibaldi crossed to the mainland. Naples fell. Suddenly, the impossible seemed to be happening. A revolutionary army was not just talking about Italy, it was physically creating it. But then came the dangerous question. If Garibaldi conquered the south, what would he do with it? Would he keep marching? Would he attack Rome? Would he create a republic? Would Italy be born as a revolution from below? Or would it be absorbed into the monarchy of Piedmont? This was the moment where Italy could have split into rival dreams. Garibaldi was a Republican hero. Cavour feared revolution. Victor Emmanuel II, King of Piedmont Sardinia, represented monarchy and order. The future of Italy hung on a meeting. In 1860, Garibaldi met Victor Emmanuel II near Teano. Garibaldi could have challenged the king. He could have tried to keep power. He could have pushed the revolution further. Instead, he handed over his conquests to Victor Emmanuel. It was one of the most important acts of restraint in modern European history. The revolutionary hero stepped back so the country could step forward. Italy would be united under a king, not under a republic. In 1861, the Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed. But the story was not finished. Venetia was still outside the kingdom. Rome was still ruled by the Pope and protected by French troops. Italy existed, but it was incomplete. That incompleteness mattered, because the dream of a nation often becomes more powerful when one piece is missing. In 1866, after Prussia defeated Austria, Italy gained Venetia. Then in 1870, another war changed Italy's fate. France withdrew troops from Rome because it was fighting Prussia. Italian troops entered Rome. The city that had once been the heart of the Roman Empire became the capital of modern Italy. Italy's unification was now much closer to complete. But the new Italy faced a difficult truth. Creating a country on the map was easier than creating one nation in people's daily lives. North and South were different. Local identities remained strong. Many people had not fought for nationalism. Some had simply watched one ruling system replace another. Still, Italy's unification mattered enormously. It showed that nationalism could break old political arrangements. It showed that a people divided among dynasties, foreign powers, and religious territories could be reorganized into a modern nation-state. But Italy was only half the earthquake. To the north, another unification was unfolding, and this one would shake Europe even harder. Before Germany became Germany, there were many German states. Some were kingdoms, some were duchies, some were free cities. Many were linked by language, culture, and trade, but politically they were not one nation. The old German Confederation included dozens of states, and two powers stood above the rest: Austria and Prussia. The central question was this: if Germany united, who would lead it? Austria had prestige, tradition, and imperial history. Prussia had a growing army, strong administration, and a leadership willing to take risks. The man who turned Prussia's opportunity into German unification was Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck did not invent German nationalism, but he understood how to use it. He was not a street revolutionary. He was not a romantic poet. He was a conservative aristocrat who wanted Prussia to become stronger, and he saw that German unity could serve Prussian power. This is what made him so dangerous. He could take an emotional idea and turn it into statecraft. His famous message was that the great questions of the time would not be decided by speeches alone, but by iron and blood. That did not mean chaos. It meant controlled violence. War used carefully, diplomacy used ruthlessly, nationalism used strategically. Bismarck's path to German unity came through 3 wars. The first was against Denmark in 1864. The issue centered on Schleswig and Holstein, duchies with complex ties to Denmark and the German world. Prussia and Austria fought Denmark together. They won, but the victory created a new problem. Who would control the conquered duchies? Prussia and Austria now had a shared prize and a reason to quarrel. For Bismarck, this was not a failure. It was an opening. The Second War came in 1866. Prussia fought Austria. This was the decisive struggle over who would dominate Germany. Many expected a long and uncertain conflict. Instead, Prussia won quickly. The Battle of Königgrätz showed the effectiveness of Prussian military organization, rail movement, and command. Austria was pushed out of German affairs. The old German Confederation was dissolved. Prussia then formed the North German Confederation in 1867. This was not yet the final German Empire, but it was a major step. The northern German states were now organized under Prussian leadership. The south, including Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, and Hesse-Darmstadt, remained outside. So one last question remained: how could Prussia bring the southern German states into unity? Bismarck needed an outside threat, and the most useful outside threat was France. France, under Napoleon III, did not want a powerful united Germany on its eastern border. A strong Prussia had already upset the European balance. A united Germany would be even more alarming. The tension grew around a diplomatic crisis involving the Spanish throne. A Prussian prince had been considered as a candidate for the Spanish crown. France objected. the crisis might have faded. But Bismarck edited and released a version of a diplomatic message known as the Ems Dispatch. The wording made both sides feel insulted. France felt provoked. Prussia appeared defiant. Public opinion burned. In 1870, France declared war on Prussia. And this was exactly the kind of war Bismarck could use. To many southern German states, France now looked like the aggressor. German nationalism surged. The southern states joined Prussia against France. The Franco-Prussian War became the final furnace of German unity. The French army was defeated. Napoleon III was captured at Sedan. Paris was besieged. France, which had long been one of Europe's dominant powers, was humiliated. And then came the symbolic scene that shocked the continent. On January 18, 1871, German princes gathered in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, not in Berlin, not in Frankfurt, but inside the palace of France's kings. There, King Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed German emperor. Germany was born in the palace of a defeated enemy. The message was impossible to miss. A new power had arrived in Europe. Italy had been born through a mixture of diplomacy, rebellion, and national romance. Germany had been born through diplomacy, military victories, and Prussian dominance. Both were unifications. But they felt completely different. Italy's story often looked like a national dream finally finding a flag. Germany's story looked like a new engine of power being switched on. And that difference mattered. The unification of Italy changed the map. The unification of Germany changed the balance of the entire continent. Before 1871, Central Europe had been politically fragmented. After 1871, a powerful German empire stood in the middle of Europe with industry, population, military strength, and strategic position. France was weakened and angry. Austria had been pushed out of German leadership. Prussia had become the core of a new empire. Britain now had to watch a rising continental power. Russia had to consider a stronger Germany in European diplomacy. The old balance was gone. This is why German unification was not only a national event, it was a European turning point. It helped end the old world created after Napoleon's defeat. It made nationalism one of the strongest forces in international politics. It proved that modern states could be built not only by royal marriage or inheritance, but by mass identity, military planning, and diplomatic pressure. But it also created a dangerous lesson. If nationalism could unite people, it could also divide them from others. If war could build a nation, leaders might believe war could solve other problems too. Italy and Germany became examples for people across Europe. For some, they were inspiring. They showed that divided peoples could overcome old borders and foreign domination. For others, they were frightening. They showed that nationalism could destroy the old order and replace it with more powerful states. In Italy, the new country still had to struggle with poverty, regional division, political weakness, and the gap between the dream of unity and the reality of governing. In Germany, the new empire had strength from the beginning, but it was built under Prussian military and aristocratic influence. Its unity came not from a liberal revolution, but from victory in war. That shaped its political culture. It also shaped how Europe saw it. So the great puzzle of this episode is not simply how Italy and Germany unified. The deeper question is this: what happens when the map finally catches up with the idea of the nation? For centuries, Europe had been organized around dynasties, empires, churches, city-states, and aristocratic bargains. But the 19th century brought a new claim. A nation should have a state. A people should have a flag. A shared identity should become political power. Italy and Germany proved that this idea could move armies, topple rulers, redraw borders, and change the fate of continents. In Italy, the dream came through Cavour's diplomacy, Garibaldi's daring, and Victor Emmanuel's monarchy. In Germany, the dream came through Bismarck's strategy, Prussia's army, and the wars against Denmark, Austria, and France. One unification carried the image of red shirts and liberation. The other carried the sound of cannons and the echo of Versailles, but both marked the same historical shift. The age of fragmented old Europe was giving way to the age of nation-states. And once that happened, Europe could never return to what it had been. The map was no longer just a map of rulers, it was becoming a map of peoples. And when peoples began demanding states of their own, the modern world began to take shape. That is why the unification of Italy and Germany belongs among the turning points that changed the modern world. Because after 1871, Europe was not just larger or smaller in certain places. It was more dangerous, more national, more competitive, more modern. Italy showed that an old civilization could become a new nation. Germany showed that a new nation could become a great power almost overnight, and together they proved that the 19th century's most powerful force was not just empire. It was nationalism, a force that could liberate, a force that could unite, and a force that could shake the world.